Hey everybody, today I'm going to be talking about my thoughts on Hans Zimmer, but before I get to that, I'm just going to shamelessly plug my website, deepfocuslens.com. The link for it is below. I do commission portraits and I sell prints of my artwork. If you are interested in any of that, you can just go to the link that I provided below. And if you're interested in a commission and you have any questions, I have my email as well in the description box, so you can email me and we can chat. I'm always happy to work with you, and I've had a lot of fun doing it so far with different fans. But anyway, let's get to the subject at hand, the elephant in the room. As everyone knows, I am notoriously not a fan of Hans Zimmer. I'm actually surprised by it, but for whatever reason, it has become quite a big talking point among people who like to, send me messages and comments and such. And the first time I voiced my opinion on him, it got such a rise out of people. And it was hilarious. Not because of their opinions being different from mine or anything like that. That's fine. I don't care about it. But it was just more the kinds of reactions that it elicited. People were just so angry and defensive, like, you take that back. And I was just like, geez. I'm very aware that I'm in the minority on my opinions in terms of Hans Zimmer. But one thing that I do resent is when people say, oh, you're just saying that to be edgy and different, which, I take offense to that because I think, people that know, I'm very much somebody who really puts a lot of thought into why I feel a certain way about something. I try my best to really just experience something, really go by my gut reaction to something, and try not to pay attention to any of the noise surrounding it. And I try to really think about how I can communicate those points. The why aspect of criticism is very interesting to me. So when people write that off as me just trying to be different or hipster or whatever, I'm like, come on. I think I deserve a little more credit than that. But, whatever. Music is just, as a lot of people know who are fans of my music, is a huge part of my life. And it's something that I take very seriously. And I take musical scoring very seriously. I have my entire life been a huge fan of musical scoring for film. And it's just simply, Zimmer does not satisfy my personal taste in terms of what I prefer in scores. I'm not saying that he's not a talented person. Of course he's talented. Of course he's creative. And he has kind of an innovative mind to a degree. I even like some of his scores, especially, the scores that he did in the earlier half of his career. Some of those I really liked growing up, as a kid and as a teenager. But, I admit for the most part I struggle, especially in the second half of the career, because that's when he started to really strip back the compositions, but not in a way that was really kind of particularly nuanced in terms of minimalism. But it seems that the more that he strips down the compositions to the point where they're, almost interchangeable from film to film, where a lot of that melodic coherence is lost, it seems that that's, the more he becomes popular in the mainstream. And that's something that has always just kind of perplexed me. It's just something I genuinely don't quite understand. Admittedly, I am somebody who's very drawn to the types of composers who put a lot of thought into their composition. And admittedly, my favorite scores do tend to be the kind that are very kind of symphonic and have a lot of symphonic sound. I was always drawn to the intricacy of Nino Rota as an example, the romanticism of that music, the cheekiness, the robustness of those compositions, yet the pain throughout it. There's just so many facets within a Nino Rota score. And I was always very drawn to Bernard Herrmann, who's, also somebody who I deeply respect, one of my favorite film composers of all time. And sometimes I wonder if Zimmer actually drew inspiration from him. Maybe. I don't know. Maybe not. But there's something about him, or I should say Herrmann, that's similar. It has a brooding kind of heaviness at times. Like when you hear something like Citizen Kane, Magnificent Ambersons, Vertigo as an example, all of those have a heaviness and a darkness to them. And they are a little bit more stripped down in terms of melody, but there's a lot of dimension to all of that work. The awareness of the melodrama and everything, while also creating this visceral underlying impact, to me is the irony there that is so special with Bernard Herrmann. And, just overall, the scores of the modern era for me, and I say that mainstream scores in particular, just lack so much of the ambition and the detail and just the quality, just the quality of those old film scores. The famous scores of people like David Lean and Elmer Bernstein and Ennio Morricone and Alex North. And then you have John Williams, who comes a little bit later, and he's trying to recapture that nostalgic symphonic sound in the films of the 70s and so on and so forth, that epic scope. And he does it really, really well with a renewed energy that was exciting and refreshing and perhaps not as cerebral as some of the ones that I mentioned before, the David Leans of the world, the Hermans, and etc. But, really excellent. And John Williams was my life as a child. I mean, of course he was. And as a kid, I also liked Zimmer's scores, though I never held them quite to that level of reverence. On a surface level, I really did enjoy kind of the energy of a Hans Zimmer score, an early Hans Zimmer score, because it had kind of that rousing sort of entertainment value to it. And I enjoyed sections of the Lion King soundtrack very, very much. Overall, I really enjoy the Gladiator soundtrack as well. That is something that I listened to so much as a child with my dad, with my brother. I'm surprised that the CD still works. Still to this day, I enjoy it. It just has a level of energy to it. The brassiness of it is very reminiscent of somebody like maybe Alex North that I mentioned earlier, but still with kind of that modern kind of quality to it, that grit, even with the cliche, very exotic female choral voice that you hear throughout it, which was very in vogue back in the early 2000s and mid 2000s. It's a hell of a good time. And I will say sometimes the things that I normally think are a detriment to him, certain things that I find to be weaknesses of Zimmer, sometimes he ends up doing well and somehow turning them into a strength in a weird way. Like his score for The Rock, as an example, which was, The Rock directed by the great Michael Bay. That score it's just hilarious. It's legendary. It is so ridiculously cartoony and over the top and just pure machismo fun. And, it works because Zimmer, he's never been somebody that I think has great taste in terms of how, his instrumentation, his choices for it. He's always lacked restraint for me, and he's always been a little bit shameless, and I think that really worked for Michael Bay. For whatever reason, it just hit a sweet spot there. It has electric guitars and everything, and it's the perfect guilty pleasure. It has a dad rock vibe to it that somehow really is amusing and fun. When he took over for the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise fully, as in when he did, like the sequel and I think the third one as well, I didn't care for it because there was just like something that felt really fake about it. The electronic strings just didn't work nearly as well as the arrangements in the original film. It has a very dated quality to it, a heaviness with not very much humor. There is humor in the instrumentation, but it's not very clever, definitely not. And it felt like it dragged rather than feeling really exciting and rousing and full of irony and cheekiness, and in a way that I want my music for Pirates of the Caribbean to be. And again, it has a feeling of it that feels like a dad rock cover at times, but this one just felt kind of lackluster and sluggish compared to something like, like I mentioned, The Rock, which happened years before. So yeah, I'm admitting that I do like certain, scores that he's done, and I admitted that in a couple episodes prior. But like I said, there was a point in the mid 2000s, I'll say, where his scores just took a turn, a very specific turn, and it really, I feel like we can credit Christopher Nolan for that, their collaboration, because it has become kind of, in our modern day at least, an iconic director and composer duo. It really starts with Batman. Batman Begins, The Dark Knight Rises, that particular trio of films, and then, going into Inception as well. I think all of those scores are a total miss. They're just very heavy and brassy and chaotic, and they just go right for the knee-jerk reaction, right for the jugular. I know that the style that Christopher Nolan is going for is a lot more sleek and minimal, and that's totally fine. But that didn't work for me either, and I've mentioned that if you watch my my review for Dark Knight and all of that. But I loved Tim Burton's, at least his aesthetic for Batman, I think captures all the facets I love about Batman. But the score that Danny Elfman did as well, it had that quality, that cartoony quality, the darkness, the theatricality, and even I think Batman the Animated Series, the theme that Shirley Walker did for that is maybe the best of them all. It really captures that mysterious quality to it. And, I just wanted more of that poetry and that dimension in the music, even just a little bit. Even with the minimalism, you can go for that nuance. Because there are minimalistic composers that do it very well. I mentioned this in a video where I talked about some of my favorite scores of the previous decade, and I talked about Mika Levy, who's a wonderful musician. She was in a band. She's also classically trained. I look at somebody like Trent Reznor, who's done some great scores. Another great, a much better, in my opinion, duo would be his collaborations with Fincher. Or Johnny Greenwood is the best of them, in my opinion, the best composer we have working today in terms of films, who uses textures in a way that are so special and so sophisticated, and they enhance, they don't flatten the space. I hear a lot of people asking me about Blade Runner 2049 and his score for that, and again, I prefer the original. The drone of his music, again, the heaviness of the soundscape just really overpowers everything rather than highlighting that incredible world building. It drowns the sound out in a way that is really distracting for me, and that was the big aesthetic issue that I had with the new film. Otherwise, it was just absolutely extraordinary. In my opinion, the original score for Blade Runner is just so much better. So much better. It's got things about, you can tell there's thought put into it. It's unusual. It breaks up this kind of synth style. It adds exotic and unexpected instrumentation. It builds, different characters have different themes that are quite distinguishable from the rest. There's light and shade, there's fast and slow, there are, highs and lows in the music, and unlike, a lot of Zimmer, which feels a lot like it's just kind of this overtone of just, just like heavy anxiety and just going for the immediate emotion always. Again, it just feels like cheap shots to me. And I just felt like he was phoning it in more and more. He works like a dog. I mean, seriously, he works so much as a composer. It's kind of ridiculous. And I think because he churns out, score after score after score, I think with anybody, even somebody who was, a genius, they would feel kind of spread a little bit too thin. I think he's kind of wrung the towel dry a little bit. And already that's an issue because he already just lacked naturally the versatility and the foundation of the more accomplished film composers. So yeah, just a lot of it lately just feels like viscera for the sake of viscera, or just phoning it in. I like the score to Interstellar because at least he was putting some thought and doing something a little bit different. I like the highlight of the organ and I like kind of the epic scope of it. But again, just the weight of everything made it really hard for me to appreciate the shape of some of those ideas that he was going for. Now, Tenet is the very interesting thing because, of course, as a lot of people know, that is the one time in a long time that Zimmer and Nolan did not work together because Zimmer had a previous conflict. He was working on Doom at the time. So he had to be replaced with a young composer who is half his age, Ludwig Göransson, I think is how you say his name. Clearly, Nolan told him, I want to go for the style that I'm used to, writing it in a way like this is how Hans Zimmer would do it. But I felt like in a way that exposed everything because I think that Göransson did Hans Zimmer better than Hans Zimmer can. And for those of you who are not musically inclined, who may not pick up on all of the details of musical scoring in the way that maybe a musician would, I feel like if nobody told you that Hans Zimmer had been replaced, you wouldn't know the difference. Which is kind of sad to me because for somebody who's considered so auteur, I think it's, knowing they can be so easily replaced is not good. But I've definitely listened to the Tenet score separately to really look at the differences between the two composers. And I'm sorry, the formal training is very evident in Göransson. I don't love the score, but I definitely prefer it to a lot of the Zimmer and Nolan collaborations, pretty much almost all of them. And yes, it is going for a lot of those typical motifs that we do see from Zimmer quite often. But what I like about it is that he strips away a lot of that heavy, kind of metallic quality to it and the inability to pick up on those textures so that there is some shape to it and some resemblance of coherence. I found myself kind of interested and curious about a lot of the instrumentation. He's doing kind of some glitchy sort of things, a lot of textures that add a little bit of dimension to, a very kind of minimalistic style of scoring. It did leave a little bit to be desired, but I found myself wanting to turn up certain parts of the score and listening to it multiple times and picking up on things that I didn't normally. But unfortunately, just Tenet, overall, one of the big criticisms I had about it, is just the sound. And I have that issue with Nolan a lot. The sound is just so unbalanced naturally throughout the entire movie. And I hope that unfortunately kind of the lighter quality of this score might help out his movie a little bit more so we can really hear what the people are saying. But it did not help in this case. But then I think about it. Imagine if Hans Zimmer did do this score. I already had so much of an issue trying to hear the people. I had to watch the movie with subtitles. So I feel like if Hans Zimmer was doing the score, the dialogue would be absolutely incomprehensible. But yeah, overall, I think you can really hear who has the musical fundamentals and who doesn't. Göransson does and Zimmer doesn't. Zimmer is fine if you really just want to get your blood pumping and you want to go for some angsty mood, whatever it is. But beyond that, again, I find very little replay value to it, nothing memorable, not very good compositionally, and poor choice of instrumentation, as I said. Poor judgment in terms of just the ability to read sound, in a cinematic way. Being able to understand that music is more meant to provide the framework for everything that's happening on screen, not overpower it. And I know you guys are ready to, fire away on the keyboards there, and that's, totally fine. Go ahead. I'm cool with it. Again, I'm not upset or offended by it. I'm just more offended by when people write me off as I don't, I just say things to get views or to be different. And it's like, no, that's the point I wanted to do, is I do really think about these things. This is something that has been, something I felt about Zimmer ever since I was maybe about 15 years old, 15 or 16, because I originally liked him and I just didn't like the direction he went in. So yeah, it's all here. It's all in one video. I just want to give you some insight into my thoughts where it's all here and people can just accept it or not accept it, and just to address things, because I get this question constantly, or I get, berated about my opinions on Hans Zimmer. And so that way, if other people start asking, why doesn't she like Hans Zimmer? Why don't you like Hans Zimmer? Just direct them to this video, please. But yes, that is the video. Thank you guys so much for watching, as always. Here are my Patreon supporters. You guys are wonderful. A special shout out to all of you. If you are interested in becoming a patron, the link for that is below, as well as my social media information. You can watch more videos here, and you can subscribe if you'd like. Catch you next time.